Texas football suffers their third consecutive loss. Texas soccer advances to the Big 12 semifinals, and we preview the upcoming women's basketball season. All this and more on College Press Box. Good evening and welcome into College Press Box. I am your host, Jason Kinander. We have a loaded slate for you tonight, so let's get right into it. On Saturday, Texas football traveled up to Waco where the Longhorns looked to avenge their two-game losing streak in a showdown with the Baylor Bears. Unfortunately, Texas would suffer a far too familiar fate, blowing a second-half lead for the third consecutive game. Here's how it all unfolded. We begin on the opening drive of the game as Baylor quarterback Jerry Bohannon sits in the pocket only to be intercepted by B.J. Foster, who returns it deep into Baylor territory for 31 yards, setting up the Longhorns here on 3rd and 4. Casey Thompson delivering a strike over the middle to Joshua Moore for the touchdown. Texas scoring first for their third consecutive game. Baylor responding with a little razzle-dazzle. The ball ends up in the hands of Baylor receiver R.J. Sneed for the game-tying touchdown. Baylor would take the lead on a field goal, setting up this beautiful throw from Thompson to a wide-open Xavier Worthy, who would go all the way for a 63-yard touchdown. Texas leading 14-10. Late in the second quarter, Texas looking to score when Casey Thompson throws a pick over the middle, tipped off the hands of Joshua Moore, and returned deep into Texas territory. The Longhorns would bounce back, however, as Bijan Robinson would find the end zone on 4th and goal, making it a 21-10 game. Unfortunately, it would be all Baylor from there. Bohannon keeping himself and evading Longhorns defenders into the end zone to cut it to a 4-point game. Baylor would march down the field on the ensuing drive, giving it to the big man Ben Sims, who would slip in for a touchdown and a Baylor lead. Baylor would deliver the final nail in the coffin here as Abram Smith would take the pitch and catch all the way to the house, evading a sea of Longhorns defenders. Texas would be able to cut the Baylor lead down to a touchdown with a field goal. Unfortunately, a Thompson interception on the final drive would seal the deal, Texas losing their third consecutive game. As we take a look at the statistics here, Casey Thompson, 2 touchdowns and an interception. Bijan Robinson with 43 yards on an off day for him. Xavier Worthy back in the column with a big game, 4 receptions for 115 yards and a touchdown. As the Longhorns fall to 4-4, Baylor now 7-1 on the season, deep in competition for a Big 12 championship berth. Our own Adam Ogburn was at Baylor's McLean Stadium on Saturday to cover the game. Let's send it over to Adam and take a look at what he had to say following the Texas loss.
Texas traveled up to Waco on Saturday to take on number 16 Baylor, hoping to snap a 2-game losing streak. The Longhorns started the game in perfect fashion as Casey Thompson delivered a 10-yard touchdown pass to Joshua Moore. It was the 6th straight game in which Texas had scored on its first drive. At the break, Texas led 14-10, thanks in part to the 63-yard Xavier Worthy touchdown catch. It was also the 6th straight game that the Longhorns had led at halftime. But Texas unraveled in the second half for the 3rd game in a row, as Baylor scored 21 unanswered points en route to a 31-24 victory. After the game, linebacker Ovia Gofu reflected on what was another heartbreaking defeat for the Longhorns.
It's just finishing. That's really it. We play really good football for the most part, and then it's just the end. And it hurts. I mean, it's losses that are they're not blowouts or anything like that. They're like small margin losses, and those are the ones that hurts the most.
Drops were a problem in the Texas passing game throughout the contest. But afterwards, Casey Thompson was quick to come to the defense of his receivers.
I never want to be negative. Obviously, they didn't try to, drop the pass on purpose. Or nobody ever tries to make a mistake on purpose. At the end of the day, whenever I make a mistake, then because it's going to happen at some point. Nobody's perfect. Those guys do a great job of also, just staying positive and encouraging me as well.
All 3 second-half Baylor touchdowns were scored on rushing plays as Texas gave up over 200 yards on the ground for the 3rd straight week. Defensive tackle Keandre Coburn promised that he and the defense will keep searching for answers.
I mean, it is frustrating. I mean, we just lost 3 games in a row. I mean, who wouldn't be frustrated in that type of point? But like Coach said, nobody gonna feel sorry for us. It's only us. So all I could do is just constantly just continue taking the coaching that I'm giving and take it the right way and have the right good mindset.
And even with the possibility of a Big 12 title now off the table, head coach Steve Sarkisian promised that his team will give everything they have over the next 4 games.
Without question, we can go higher. I'll never settle. I'll never put a ceiling on our guys. There's always a new level that we can go to. I love that aspect of sport. We can always improve. We can always strive for more, and we definitely have more there. And I welcome the challenge to get us there.
Texas' loss against Baylor marks the first time the Longhorns have lost 3 games in a row, dating all the way back to November 2016, the end of the Charlie Strong era. Texas will look to get back on track and erase these second half struggles when they travel to Ames to take on Iowa State next Saturday. Until next time, for TSTV Sports, I'm Adam Ogburn.
We are very lucky to be joined tonight by our football analyst, Harrison Chiu. Harrison, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
So we just saw how Saturday's game unfolded in Waco, but tell me specifically, what do you think is going wrong for this Texas team?
Well, Jason, here's what's going on. Texas blew a second half lead for the 3rd straight week. Its offense struggled and the defense eventually gave in. After the bye week, Texas looked to clean up offense and defensive line struggles, but neither of the units looked great this past Saturday. Baylor took away Texas's run game, where Bijan only had 43 yards on 17 carries and made them one-dimensional, forcing Texas into several 3rd and longs. Texas went 3 for 14 on 3rd down, putting the pressure back on its defense time and time again. But even when there were chances, Texas failed to capitalize. Whether that was missing a wide-open Xavier Worthy for a touchdown late in the first half, a key Joshua Moore fumble, or a drop in the final drive, Texas crumbled late. Combine these mistakes with inopportune penalties, a low Bijan usage rate, a defense who gave up 199 yards on the ground, and a shocking fake punt call, you have a team that lacks the grit and backbone to handle pressure and adversity. And that is the biggest problem for this team. There is and has been a culture problem for the Texas Longhorns well before Coach Sark got here. And, history can creep into your head, like Coach Sark said after the game. Well, that can never be more true than now.
Coach Sarkisian said in his press conference today that this team is just a couple of plays away from being 7-1. Unbelievable. And it seems like we've asked this question after each of the last 3 games, but it still remains a topic of debate. How can the Longhorns possibly salvage their season?
I think that the Longhorns, by the end of the season, has to be able to identify their identity. They have to find a way to finish games. They have to prove that to themselves that they can finish drives, games, and the season strong. Texas's goal of a rematch against OU at AT&T Stadium is pretty much over. So with nothing else to play for but pride, the Longhorns have to salvage the season by winning despite all the noise around them. By having good showings in their Final 4 conference games, Texas can close the season with momentum by playing in their biggest bowl game and setting themselves up in recruiting. If Texas wants the likes of Denver Harris, Evan Stewart, potentially Arch Manning in 2023, you have to win out and win your bowl game. It is as simple as that.
It's not just the students and the alumni watching. The recruits are certainly with their eyes peeled. So year 1 of the Steve Sarkisian era might not have went according to plan. But how many of these struggles do you think fall on Coach Sark, considering that these players are not the ones that he recruited?
Whenever a powerhouse program like Texas drops 3 straight, especially in the manner that they have, winning or leading until the second half, they blow the leads, the majority of the blame will always be directed at head coach Steve Sarkisian. When Texas hired Coach Sark, everybody expected one thing: change. Change in mentality, player development, and play style. And at 4-4 right now, UT has Tom Herman fans pretty happy right now. How could they not? Coach Sark doesn't have his players he recruited, like you said, Jason, but let's face it, he's had a top 2 recruiting class in the Big 12 each of the last 3 years to work with. And they have a lot more talent than a Baylor, Oklahoma State, and others. Nobody expected Texas under this new coaching staff to compete for the college football playoff, but people at least expected Texas to play for the Big 12 title. Now, Texas fans expected better offensive and defensive line play under new coaches Flood and PK, but most of all, the Longhorn faithful expected a change in mentality, an ability to finish games and not quit on each other and be disciplined. It was always going to be difficult to implement change and win immediately, but Coach Sark, lately you're not hearing all gas, no brakes a lot on the 40 acres.
No kidding, Harrison. Thank you, as always, for joining us tonight. When we return, we will take a look at Texas soccer's run to the Big 12 semifinals. You certainly will not want to miss it. We will be right back. Welcome back into College Press Box. Last weekend, Texas soccer took part in the opening rounds of the Big 12 tournament, setting up a quarterfinal showdown with rival Oklahoma. Here's how the highly anticipated showdown went down on the pitch. With 2:28 remaining in the first half, Texas threatening when Mackenzie McFarland takes the pass from Trinity Byers for the crucial opening strike. Texas would go up 1-0 over Oklahoma. Just a couple minutes later, it's McFarland again, getting the rebound on the Lexi Massimo shot for the clutch goal, making it 2-0 Longhorns at the break. Early on in the second half, Oklahoma looking to get on the board as a stretch pass would reach Bailey Wesco, who would do the rest for the big goal, making it a one-score game for Oklahoma against the Longhorns. However, Texas would luckily bounce back immediately as Byers takes a long pass from Massimo, fakes the goalie, and fills the empty net with a goal for the quick answer. Massimo and Byers been so good all season. Great to see them come through when it matters the most. Another Texas score make it 4-1 Longhorns before Oklahoma's Jasmine Richards works the ball around a pair of Longhorn defenders, spotting the ball perfectly for the goal. Unfortunately, it would be too little too late for Oklahoma. Byers officially putting this one on ice with her second goal of the night, making it 5-2 Texas, a score that would hold final. And I am now joined by our wonderful soccer analyst, Emme Bassnet. Emme, thank you as always for joining us.
Of course, I'm excited to be here.
Okay, so Texas now the second seed, advancing to the Big 12 semifinals. What did you see against OU last night?
Well, you see them clinching this game kind of with a lot of fervor, a lot of excitement, with Trinity Byers scoring her first hat trick. I just want to shout out Trinity Byers first and foremost. 13 straight matches, in addition to her two other goals, scored her first career hat trick last night, like I was saying before, which marks only the 15th in Texas history. She also now has 12 goals to her name this year, which marks the 6th most by any player in the program. So lots of history being made here. Another shout out, freshman Lexi Massimo, another star of this Texas team with 13 single season assists, making yet again history at Texas. They just finished very strong in this game against OU, and they constantly pressured OU's defense and ended up besting their goalie with about 5 shots on goal. So,
you know, Massimo and Byers, we hear those two last names every single week on the show, and it never gets old. So the next game for Texas against the number 6 seed West Virginia, semifinal matchup, huge game Thursday. What can we expect to see?
So Texas was not able to secure a win over West Virginia earlier in the season. They actually ended up tying them 0-0 after 2 overtimes. What went wrong here was that West Virginia outshot Texas. There was not enough shots on goal by Texas, which is a problem with the offense, especially with the passing game, but it also made a little bit of sense because they were without 2 starting midfielders, so that had an impact. But Texas has earned a spot here in the semifinals, and if Texas wants to come away with a win, they're going to have to score early, which will be hard against the Mountaineers because their goalie, Massey, she has only allowed more than 1 goal once this season and is also a member of the Canadian national team. So if they get the ball going early with Massimo and Byers, they're going to have to do that earlier in the game and strengthen that offensive play if they want to get their momentum going.
Absolutely. So the last time that the Longhorns won the Big 12 title was in 2007. A big chance for history this week. Any predictions for how the rest of the tournament's going to go?
A few things to note just before I get into that question is that Texas is ranked 20 and has just completed their first unbeaten conference season in team history. So I think Texas has what it takes to win this tournament because why? They're in this tournament. They're in the semis because obviously they're echoing the sentiments of that 2007 team already mirroring that streak that they had, but also going a step beyond and being unbeaten. To secure the win over West Virginia, which is their next game, that means they would be in the finals. And the other 2 teams in the semifinals are Texas Tech and TCU. They have already beaten Tech this year, so I feel like that one's in the bag. But I favor, my prediction is TCU beats out Tech, and Texas has not been able to beat TCU this season. That was their other tie. So I think it could be either or, but my prediction here is that TCU will beat Tech, Texas will beat West Virginia. It'll be TCU and Texas in the finals, and then Texas will win if they keep playing the same way they have all season.
I sure hope that everything that you said reigns true. We will certainly be cheering for Texas this weekend. Thank you for joining us, Emme. When we return, we will preview Texas women's basketball highly anticipated season opener. You will not want to miss it. We will be right back. Welcome back into College Press Box. Last season, Texas women's basketball fell just short of a national championship, and now the Longhorns are back, and as hungry as ever, we are now joined by Zach Gueck, who is going to be our women's basketball analyst tonight. Thank you, as always, for joining us.
Awesome, I'm excited.
Okay, so tell me what the roster is looking like for the upcoming season.
Well, as we all know, Texas lost arguably the best player in college basketball, Charlie Collier, the #1 overall pick to the WNBA draft, to the Dallas Wings. Texas also lost a few other big players, Celeste Taylor transferring to Duke and Kira Lambert graduating. However, Texas has replenished their roster by landing 3 of the top 20 recruits in this year's class, Aaliyah Moore, Rory Harmon, and Kendall Hunter. Texas also gained Mississippi State transfer, Aaliyah Matheru.
Being without Charlie Collier this season is going to be pretty big. Vic Schaefer's going to have a lot of work to do. So what would you say the expectations are for this season?
Well, Vic Schaefer is finally shaping up the roster to how he wants the team to be. 9 of the 13 players on the roster now are players that he actually recruited, whereas Coach Karen Aston had 9 of the 13 players last year. Last year, Texas made it to the Elite 8 with that team, so I think we can expect another deep run this year as this team, with about half new and half veteran players returning, you can expect a deep run. That's just how good Vic Schaefer is at coaching.
Yeah, you love to see the mix between young talent and veteran talent. We saw it prove beneficial for the Longhorns last March. Hopefully it will prove beneficial throughout the season. So what are your highlighted matchups on the schedule this year? Fill me in.
Well, you know, Texas doesn't have a particularly easy non-conference schedule. They open up the season against #3 Stanford on the road, the reigning NCAA champion Stanford Cardinal. And they also have road games coming up against Tennessee and Texas A&M. Those are both SEC non-conference games. Those are both ranked teams, number 15 and number 23. And then we also have to share the conference with some really good teams as well. The Baylor Bears coming in at number 7. So those are going to be some pretty tough games for Texas this season, but I think Texas has it in the bag. You know, I mean, the away games against Baylor are always going to be tough. Baylor's always one of the best teams in college basketball and women's college basketball. So, yeah, that's going to be tough.
Baylor and Tennessee, 2 of the teams you mentioned, always synonymous with women's college basketball. Zach, thank you so much for joining us tonight. When we return, we are going to highlight a pair of Longhorn football players whose accomplishments on the field this season have garnered themselves national recognition. You will not want to miss it. Welcome back into College Press Box. Although the season might not have went according to plan for Texas football, a pair of Longhorns have seen their performances this season lead to national recognition. On Monday, sophomore running back Bijan Robinson was named a Maxwell Award semifinalist. The Maxwell Award is presented annually to the College Football Player of the Year, and Robinson is the first Texas football player to be a Maxwell Award semifinalist since Sam Ellinger in 2019. On the defensive side of the ball, senior linebacker DeMarvion Overshone was named a semifinalist for the Dick Butkus Award, which is given to the top-performing linebacker in college football. Derek Johnson is the only Longhorn to have won the Butkus Award, taking home the honor in 2004. Texas baseball topped McClellan Community College 15-4, in an exhibition game at Dish Falk Field on Saturday. Kansas transfer Skylar Messenger hit a 2-run homer in the win. Texas will play in the annual 3-game Fall World Series beginning on Wednesday. Cross country had a successful showing at the Big 12 Championship on Friday as the men's team finished in 3rd place overall. Cruz Gomez led the way with an 11th place finish, while the women's team took home 4th place. Beth Ramos logged her 4th first place finish of the season for Texas, finishing in 19th place overall. Seventh-ranked Texas women's golf concluded their fall season over the weekend, taking home 7th place at the Landfall Tradition in Wilmington, North Carolina. Senior Sarah Koskova posted the low score of the weekend for Texas, tying for 12th place individually with a 1 under par weekend. And as we have reached November, it is a very busy week of Texas sports. Today, women's tennis will take on UTSA in the 25K Orlando outing, an event that will last through the week until Thursday, where both the men's and women's teams will partake in the ITA championships in San Diego. Texas soccer will continue to compete in the Big 12 tournament, semifinal game against West Virginia on Thursday in Round Rock, a match that can be seen on ESPN Plus at 7 p.m. Beginning on Friday, both the men's and women's swim and dive teams will compete in a meet at the University of Virginia that will run through Saturday. Texas volleyball will look to remain undefeated this weekend on the road against Baylor, as the Longhorns will compete at 8 p.m. on Friday on ESPNU and then at 6 p.m. on Saturday on ESPN Plus. And finally, Texas football will be back in action on Saturday night at 6:30 p.m. against Iowa State and Ames, a game that can be seen on Fox Sports 1. And that'll do it for College Press Box tonight. As always, shout out to all of our analysts, production, and all those in Master Control who make this show possible each and every week. Please do not forget to tune in to College Crossfire, hosted by our very own Drew Jacob at 9 p.m. on Wednesday night, as well as the 1-0 Sports Show this Friday morning at 11 a.m. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Jason Kinander. Have a great night.